Hi, I'm Derek Robinson, a senior technical online course developer here at InterSystems. In this video, I'll be joined by product expert Chi Lee to discuss InterSystems OMOP, including what it is, why it's valuable for people in clinical research roles, and what it looks like to use InterSystems OMOP to transform FHIR data into the OMOP format. All right, I'm joined by Chi Lee, physician executive. Chi, thanks for joining us. Can you briefly explain what InterSystems OMOP is and why it's valuable for people in clinical research roles?
Yeah, Derek, thank you for having me here. InterSystems OMOP is a solution that helps the researchers to gather real-world data from the EHRs. And in general, the real-world data is fairly important as more and more clinical studies requires the clinical data to be available to really understand the patient journey and the treatment and the outcomes and all these very important aspects of that. However, traditionally, getting the data into the repository using the OMOP common data model is very tedious and very difficult. It requires lots of technical expertise and also the very much of a lengthy process, which could be also expensive. In general, when there's a large network study, some of the sites may be able to convert their data from EHR into OMOP easily, but most of the sites, they do not have that expertise. This is critical as it will delay the start of the study and make the data very limited or biased. So by making the data much more easily from EHR into OMOP, many of the clinical studies, they have more data sets more quickly and also much easier for the researchers and to have access to the data.
Right. Nice. Yeah, it sounds like a really important use case for those audiences and a lot of related fields. So what prerequisites should users be aware of before they start using InterSystems OMOP when it comes specifically to a data and infrastructure standpoint?
Yeah, we try to make it very easy. The key thing is that from a prerequisite point of view, as always, there's a data source. Now, the data source that we're focusing on is any systems that can provide FHIR data. So this is very important to understand that even though FHIR may not be too familiar with many of the researchers, on the clinical care delivery side, FHIR, it is indeed the standard, not only as a mandate by the government, U.S. federal agencies or the European organizations as a way to share clinical data. And this is also increasingly being utilized to support many of the important business functions, clinical functions. So the prerequisite is a clinical system. It could be the EHR. It could be a clinical repository that's using the FHIR standard. They can supply the data in a FHIR format. That's really the only prerequisite as a reliable data source using the FHIR standard API.
Great. Yeah, sounds straightforward. So, looking at that prereq, let's maybe dive into the demo at this point, and maybe you can show us how to set up that storage where your source FHIR data will be stored to be used by InterSystems OMOP.
Absolutely, I'll be happy to show you that. Let me show you the application that the researchers and the research team will be able to have access to. And this is very much a managed services where as a research department, you do not have to set up anything. All you need to do is working with our managed services team to get you onboarded. In the onboarding process, our team will be able to, based on what you have subscribed, and we'll be able to set up these deployments. The deployments contains several services, including the transformation pipeline, which getting the data from EHR sources, but also transforming the data in the store into the OMOP repository. We're taking the data in a FHIR format. And you'll see that in this case, here is a deployment where our managed services team have created for you. And the initial creation will be allocating the cloud computing resources to be able to handle the volume and the performance that you desire. We make it very easy for you to also access the data and get all the assistance that you needed. So you really do not have to have any much of a technical expertise in terms of using or managing this. Once the deployment is created, you can go to the configuration screen, and our managed services team can certainly provide you with the direct configuration screen you can edit, or can work with you so that it can look at some of the key areas that you need to configure. Now, the key thing about the transformation service is around flexibility. Flexibility in terms of the source of the data. In this example, it's looking at this source bucket. We're using any of the cloud services, and could be including any of the hyperscalers. In this particular example, is using the AWS S3 bucket as the source. Now, for this, there's a source bucket. There's also, you'll notice that there is a terminology bucket. And this is where the terminology files, which including the mapping, will be stored. And this allows a more of a local codes that can be mapped to the standard codes. And we have tools that help you to uncover issues related to data quality, where can help you guide you around the additional local code mapping that's needed. And also the target. The solution comes with a built-in OMOP repository using the InterSystems Iris database, but also could be sending the data to an external repository as well. Let me start with the S3 bucket example. Here's the S3 bucket that I use. You'll notice that this is the AWS S3 bucket, and I have selected QILI demo as the input source where the S3 bucket files will reside, will be placed in. Also, there's a QILI terminology mapping the directory as well. In the QILI demo, you'll notice that I have many files included already with different sizes. We also used AWS Health Lake output as well. So if you're using any of the hyperscalers FHIR repositories, their output can be supported in this solution as well natively. In the terminology directory, currently I do not have any files, but if you have any mapping files in the CSV format, and if you can upload here, which will automatically be picked up by the transformation pipeline. Let me go back to the pipeline itself and show you, once it's configured, how you can monitor it. Here you will see that there's several files have already been uploaded and are being processed. Let's just take one of them. Now you'll notice that this metrics page, it is designed so that you can look at all the transformation jobs. And by clicking on each one of them, you'll see all the key data points, including how many patients, how many resources, how long did it take, and the status, if there's an error, if it's completed. Some of these important stats, such as how many resources by type, is listed right here. This is on the FHIR ingestion aspects of it. And also some of the aggregate stats, which is really focusing on the error, transformation error. In this case, you'll notice there are 2 patients with errors and the 2 resources with errors. And we have some data quality by resources as well. Here's an example around the patient. You'll notice that patient has unrecognized race, unrecognized ethnicity. Those were viewed as errors. In the error summary, this is where you can view the detailed report of the error. Now, in this one, we try to make it very actionable, so that not only you'll see that if there are many errors, first thing is just summarize what are the coding system that is actually in these system in the source data that reported error. And so in this case, we noticed that this is the coding system that has the errors. And then in the detailed report, it will show you the patients where they have these values that actually has the generate the error. In this case, even though it is using a race concept ID, it is white, but the actual value should be a code instead of a description. So this is how it's being reported right here. And also you'll see that there's a practitioner, there's some kind of a source data was not found as error as well. Now, in the ingestion errors, this is where you can see any FHIR ingestion error details. And in this one, there's no error to look at. In the transformation, this is where you can look at particularly all these transformations that has been handled by the pipeline to look at the source data. In this case, organization source data is mapped to the care site. And these are successful, so that's good, no issues. If there are warnings, you can look at the actual warning. And this is an example, gender concept ID. It says no source data is found. And we provide utilities where you can search very easily. This is very useful for you to verify the transformation of the data from the source to the target. If you notice something's wrong, you can just run the query here without having to query the SQL tables directly. So all this makes it super easy for the researcher to understand the data quality issues, understand the transformation that have been completed, and also more importantly is to understand the data error so that they can figure out how to fix it by providing additional mapping if needed or fix the data at the source. Here's a quick overview of the solution.
Great. Yeah. I mean, so that's, I think from past conversations, really, I think the current state of this product streamlines all of that, really. It seems like from kind of getting your source data in the AWS S3 bucket, kind of seamlessly converted and transformed into OMOP, into this platform, and then being able to see all of the different data validation, data quality. Like I know data quality is a really big issue for these audiences and in this field. So it kind of seems like everything is really packaged very nicely here within this set of tabs on this part of the UI to be able to see all of that and see transparency to where that's being stored in the InterSystems Iris database, right?
Yes, indeed, absolutely. And from the OMOP user community, what we have seen both in the US, in the Europe, and in Asia as well, data quality is the number one issue. And for the ETL process is another top issue, and especially when the source data is very much a custom critical data warehouse from the hospitals. But what we're seeing is that more and more organizations, EHRs, they can supply the FHIR standard. So this is a wonderful opportunity for the researchers to take advantage of it. Not only there's a data quality that's built in related to the FHIR data transformation issues, our pipeline can surface, make it easy, but also it address another key issue, which is the ETL. And this is fairly important because the FHIR data, even though we're using a bulk FHIR format, which means that there could be thousands of patients, but you could actually just create a set of FHIR bundles where only the number of patients that have new data. So this is very important where you can do incremental refresh. So this gives also the researcher opportunity to have, for example, daily refresh of the OMOP repository. And you can do trial recruitment, you can do quality monitoring, and this becomes opening another new opportunity to use the research data for clinical care as well. So this is very important. By using the standard, this is also another huge benefit for the clinicians and researcher, is that as the FHIR standard continue to evolve by including more data types and more robust definitions, and also OMOP standard is also evolving. We're using 5.4 as the target data model. The organization is already working on 5.5 to be released. As a researcher, you don't have to worry about it. Our transformation pipeline will make sure it can get all the data from the FHIR standard to the new OMOP standard and all these transformations. This becomes one of the product enhancement that we will provide. All this is done via managed services methods so that you don't have to worry about upgrades and so on and so forth. So this really makes the researchers easier. So you can focus on the data analytics, generating data, real-world evidence, and using AI, for example, and let InterSystem deal with the data quality issue, data transformation, and make the real-world data for the researchers as easily and as quickly as possible.
Right. Yeah, that seems like a great, way that a lot of the pipeline is taken care of for them to be able to focus on the things that matter most for them and their use cases, right? So, in closing here, are there any other best practices or tips that you would want to share with people using InterSystems OMOP for being able to get the most out of this technology?
I think for the organization to take the most advantage of it is really to making sure that the fire capability at the hospital side is being robust and accessible. And technology is actually not that challenging. In this case, it's more of the research organization is able to understand what fire capability is available and how to, for example, if you want to do the generating the bulk fire and so on and so forth, you can do that. InterSystem also has additional technology that can work with the leading EHRs to help you with that. In general, I think it is a different mindset rather than coming from the traditional the data warehouse, now using FHIR as a standard. I think the most important lesson learned is that not only you continue to be the expert around the OMOP, but more importantly is also to start to understand FHIR and what are the services available, and just understanding that could be a very important data source for many of the future research. So it's merely about education, awareness, and to start talking to your internal departments, so whether it's clinical departments or IT departments, about what their strategy roadmap around the FHIR capabilities. And certainly this will become more and more promising as the world is evolving, and many organization agencies will be using the FHIR standard. So this will be a very exciting journey for all of us.
Right. Yeah, it sure sounds it. So, Chi, thank you so much for explaining everything about InterSystems OMOP to us. We appreciate it.
Derek, thank you for having me.